interconnected way really work for small businesses. And in my role at JP Morgan Chase, kind of a similar lens to what Deetra described, we're part of the financial system. And in order to make the financial system work for more and more businesses, we for years have been working on an explicit and intentional focus on communities of color. And there's a good reason for that, right? Communities of color, the Black community, if we want to pinpoint the place where we have the widest gap and the most opportunity, is a place where far too often those barriers exist and people are shut out. And if there was parity, right, if that disparity did not exist, we'd have a lot more businesses, a lot more jobs, and a lot more income in the US. And to be exact, we'd have 1 million more businesses, we'd have 9 million more jobs, and we'd have about $300 billion in more worker income. And those are things that we can't leave on the table. That's wealth that our community needs. And so frankly, understanding the role of the financial system and our place in it, understanding why there needs to be an explicit focus on communities of color, knowing that it's about collective action, that really no one institution, though we are a big piece of it, can do it all. And it takes extending the reach of what we can do through community partners. And then last but not least, I think I would add just a bit of the importance of data and why in my, I think, unique seat at JP Morgan Chase, I work in the foundation, but I'm an employee of the bank. It's our responsibility to understand how we can use our transactional data, through our JP Morgan Chase Institute to lift up issues as it relates to why it is that some businesses, particularly businesses owned by people of color, have less access to external financing. A bit of what Kyle started the conversation with, what Deetra expounded on as to why we need to work with community lenders, and what Shalonda mentioned as a bit of a broken access point for her and for other small businesses. And so it's in the weaving together of information that we can glean from our own transactional data. It's in working with policymakers to understand why there needs to be an explicit focus and strengthening of institutions like community lenders, like Black-owned banks, like CDFIs, who are really proximate to these issues, to really lift up why it is that we need to create a system of support that's not just about any one class or one loan or one investment, but it's about a just-in-time sort of environment where small businesses, especially those owned by women and people of color, have access to everything they need to grow and really close the disparity that's going to hold our communities back and hold our country back.
Thank you, Ted, for that. That's a very, very thoughtful response. Right before we got on, we were talking about the various threads associated with the OCC Project Reach. And I know that JPM Chase is one of the key participants within that program. And there is one of the projects is specifically around, I think, further investment in minority-owned banks. Could you speak to that a little bit? In terms of
Absolutely.
how you think that help in terms of increase minority minority entrepreneurship and business ownership.
Absolutely, Joanna. And I want to commend all of our government agency, partners, the Department of Treasury, who's been at this for some time, lifting up the need to support minority depository institutions, certainly the Fed, but in this case, the FDIC. I mean, there are a number of ways in which private enterprise should be looking at solving for access to financing, solving for access to bank services as more than just a one-size-fits-all, but as more than just our parochial corner of the universe. And so we've been involved, JP Morgan Chase has been involved in working closely with minority depository institutions as an outgrowth of the Department of Treasury's Mentor Protege program. And there are two banks in particular that we work with directly, but there's also a need for us to do more and for others to do more. And so our work with Liberty Bank based in New Orleans and Harvard Bank based in Baltimore is emblematic of that. And I think what Project Reach does is it creates a bit of a playbook for why it is that MDIs are walking that last mile, frankly, in places that larger banks would need to partner to get to, and would need to partner in order to best meet the needs of small businesses and consumers. And in our work at Chase, and in the work that I'm involved in, we've been involved in not just lifting up why these institutions need investment, but also what it is that we can do in our part to ensure, as I think Dietrich mentioned earlier, that where our services stop, theirs begins, and there's a feedback loop of communication where a small business, who does bank at a community bank, at an MDI, can then access the services needed there, and if there are additional services that they can access, that they can do so at a larger bank. And I'll just end with this point. And if we take a look at what's happened through our government intervention programs and the impact of COVID and what that's meant, we know that in that first week that there were fewer Black-owned businesses and Latinx-owned businesses, much fewer, who could access Paycheck Protection Program loans. And a lot of that just has to do with relationships with your institution, your access to the financial system. And as the program evolved, and as more and more community lenders, more proximate organizations to community got involved, we saw that disparity was closed. And so I think that's a really good example of how our government partners can play a significant role in understanding where gaps exist, and then for larger banks and larger institutions to step up and make way for supporting the needs of small business owners throughout the country.
Thank you so much for that, Ted. And Dietrich, I know that we talked a little bit briefly too about the PPP program and what that meant to small businesses. Could you explain a little bit about how you think that program worked through M&T, and are there things that you would do in retrospect to improve it and do more?
Yeah, so it was a scary time for everyone, right, going through that
Yes.
process. And so many people, like Ted was saying, felt like they were locked out. And essentially, they kind of were, right? By the time many people were able to make the decision in terms of communities of color and women, the money, at least for the first round, was gone. And so what we learned through that process really did rely on the relationships. So how do we build those stronger relationships with larger financial institutions? We were really proud of the work that we did. We approved 35,000 PPP applications for about $7 billion, and us being a more of a regional bank. But it was heartbreaking watching so many people go through that time period, being nervous that their businesses weren't going to survive. Many businesses did not, and it really all came down to the relationship and ensuring that if you had a strong relationship at an organization, many of those times they were able to tell you what you needed before the money became available. So that's what it came down to, who had access to the information and who got to it first. And I think that taught us a really good lesson in our country, just, really solidified the things that Ted was saying. The things that Ted was saying is just, it really is about how do we provide access to all people. I definitely do think we saw that with the CDFIs and the community banks, really just giving them that second round of funding. Floodgates opened up for those small businesses. So I think that's a big lesson for all of us to learn.
Thank you for that, Dietrich. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shalonda, sorry, go ahead. Was there a comment for someone? Okay. Shalonda, going back to you, you talked about your triple minority, but I'd also suggest that as an engineer and a woman, that's not as common as well. And we talked a little bit about the importance of really investing in people so that they have the right educations going forward. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about your view on STEM education, and how do we make certain that we are investing in the future for college students, and particularly using the historically Black colleges in that regard as well, Shalonda.
No, thank you so much. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I actually had an opportunity now in serving on the National Women's Business Council. I know you mentioned that earlier. talking about what we do as a council in providing advice and policy recommendations to the president, to Congress, and to the SBA, which is interesting. And so for us as a council, we really prioritized our areas around access to capital, around STEM, and around rural outreach for some of those businesses. So we're focused on women and minority businesses in that right. In particular, as it relates to the STEM education piece and what's so key, as I mentioned, I went into that field primarily because I knew I would be able to get a job, you know what I mean, coming out of that. But what you don't think about is so many women and so many minorities who do not go into those fields and why they do in there. And when you look at tech and all of those things, those are fields that can really become game changers in terms of economic output and income. And so within the National Women's Business Council, one of the things that we really focused on is you start to talk about, well, what are some things that can be done? We really know that the National Sciences Foundation should really prioritize studying women and girls in computer science in particular in its grant making, right? As well as highlighting what are the best practices. Congress should really look at how they expand the scope of NSF grant research, right? For female students, I remember doing research in college, and you start to think about what happens beyond that. And then to go even further, when you think about the number of patents that don't come out, right, that we don't typically do in the area of for minorities and all of that. And those are game-changing ways that we could elevate the game and opportunities for us to really grow in the STEM field.
Yes, and speaking of the complexity of patents, so we've got a world of people who do that here for us at FICO. But that, as they think about that for a small business entrepreneur, very, very complicated to navigate that. And so, Kyle, is that something that you would think of as important as you're thinking about investment portfolios and how to invest? And are there ways that we could help folk more around thinking about how to capitalize on their IP and protect their IP?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think the one of the challenges that we face is, or I would say that minority founders face is that they don't. They may not have access to the resources that and the knowledge and expertise that others may have. And so I think the educational programs that through Operation Hope, through others, of actually reaching out and saying, look, if you have a good idea, there's steps you can take to protect that idea. There's steps you can take to trademark the copyright. And I think all entrepreneurs could use education around those topics. And one of the challenges that today is that some groups of entrepreneurs have more access to that than others. And so I think that's absolutely a step that we can take through broader educational efforts.
Thanks, Kyle. I think we're coming close to the time where we're supposed to have our attendees break off to come up with their ideas. But I'm going to just do a quick 30-second round with our experts here to say, if you were going to suggest the top thing that you think would be most impactful, what would you say it is? And so let's quick go to Shalonda.
I think so many, but I do think the SBA should continue to prioritize and make permanent approval for CDFIs and minority depository institutions as eligible lenders across all SBA loan programs.
Idra? Put you guys on the hot seat here.
Yeah, I know. For me, relationships, that's the biggest thing. How do we form those relationships? How do we bring back the trust or create the trust, frankly, that hasn't really been there? And I think that would come down to different financial institutions really making it mandatory for looking at the number of business owners that you're reaching out to and what the diversity makeup of the client base that you're going after. So I think it has to boil down to that, like really being intentional.
Intentional, goal-based, measured. Yep. Great. Thank you, Deidre. Ted?
I'd build on that and say if we are serious about being explicit with respect to our economic recovery and equity, if we want to create equity in our communities, then we need to ensure that we have a focus on underserved communities with the opportunity to frame it as just that, an opportunity. And so I'm in philanthropy, so let us invest in organizations led by and for people of color. That's the way to walk the last mile to ensure that we get to a recovery that's equitable for all people.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Ted. And Kyle, last thoughts?
Yeah, no, great ideas from everyone. I think my idea would frankly be a combination of those that have been said already, which is, I mean, let's measure and report and have transparency around where SBA funds are going. Let's hold banks accountable for how those funds are being allocated, and let's look at. I mean, if those funds are going to a set of entrepreneurs or set of founders that that don't reflect the underlying communities from which they're coming, then we've got a problem, right? And then that at least puts it on the table that we can go address the problem.
Great. So I'm hearing a lot about transparency and measuring and making certain that we're doing the right things together. This has been fantastic. So I need to see how do we next move to the next session, looking for a little technical support of finding who might be willing to be the moderator for the upcoming time period that you have together to come back and report out what you think the top 5 ideas are from this session.
Hi, Joanne. This is Harry with the Hope Global Forum staff. I will be going ahead and assigning everyone into their rooms. And thank you all again for speaking today. And I just want to let everyone know they'll be moving to the next session shortly. Yeah, so in just a few moments, I will be placing everyone into the rooms that they're assigned to. I'm trying to make sure there's enough volunteers in each group just to be able to lead the sessions and make sure that we can keep the ideas moving, get everybody a chance to speak. I provided a link in the chat where this will be submitting the notes. And as soon as the breakouts return to the main session, that's when we'll have those volunteers specifically speak up for their group. Does that sound okay?
That sounds fantastic.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, so I'll be going ahead and assigning everybody in just a few moments.
Okay.
All right, thank you all so much.
Just for clarity, because I don't see in the chat a link. Did he say he's going to, or he has?
Yes.
There will be a link. So for the panelists, thank you all so much for your participation. This is just for the participants. What's going to happen is we'll actually bring you out into the main room. So this is specifically for the HGF staff volunteers to take notes based on each of the participant groups.
Thank you.
I can go ahead and drop that note in the chat again.
What were the top 5 ideas, Joanne? What did you say that we're supposed to be?
Yeah, so this is your assignment, is to come back and tell us what the top 5 ideas should be in order to increase the pipeline of capital access for minority-owned small businesses. So this is your task, is to come back and report out, what do you think, based upon this discussion today, Operation Hope and others should be focused on in order to improve minority homeowner. I keep saying homeownership. Sorry, I've been spending so much time on that. Minority-owned business entrepreneurship. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you. This was Natasha Shar from Operation Hope.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, everybody, we're going to be moving to the sessions right now.
Thank you.
Again, there may be a couple people that may have joined late, so we're going to go ahead and put them in their rooms. And again, for you folks on the panel, we just want Anytime.
Got it. Can we speak with each other at this point?
You can feel free to speak. All the participants are in the breakouts. I will mention that this session is recorded, so I think perhaps I'll ask the technician to go ahead and just mute it for the stream of the for the Zoom. So you should be able to speak to each other internally though. Give me one moment.
Okay, thank you. So I think we can speak to each other and not be recorded now.
anybody there? I disconnected from my group.
Hello, hello to all attendees that are in this meeting room. Hi, we'll be putting folks in, we're in a breakout session now. If you haven't been assigned a room, I can go ahead and assign you. We'll be it'll be mid-conversation, but if you can just, contribute. What the task is that we're coming up with, actually, let me put this back in the chat so everyone can read. We're coming up with 5 big ideas to present to the panel as soon as we return. Let me go ahead and post that in the chat now. Bear with us, folks. Oh, you're breaking up a bit there.
I think the panelists are trying.
Disconnected from my group.
Okay, copy that. I'll be putting you back in. Did you know what room you're in?
I didn't know the number.
Sounds good, not a worry.
Hi, this is Joanne. So I think myself and the panelists are just waiting to understand when you bring the folks back to us. Is that correct?
Hey, again, just for an announcement for those who got disconnected or for folks who just came in late, we are actually in breakout sessions. I have to assign you all to those specific rooms. So bear with me. I see a few folks here that are sitting unassigned. I'm gonna go ahead and make those assignments now. All right, so I have people assigned to rooms. So all you'll have to do, if you see notification to join a breakout room, please go ahead and join that breakout room. For those of you folks who just joined, we are actually about wrapping up on our breakout sessions. There have been groups that have been split up. In just a few moments, we'll be bringing them back to report on the ideas that they have for the Idea Labs. If you just joined, sit tight. We'll come back and have them folks present.